Okay, so we're focusing on Keeley Hawes' Lindsay Denton, who at the beginning of the episode is involved in what do you call it, sort of a disaster, where she's sort of helping an undercover cop escape with an unidentified witness. And of course we had this terrific opening scene where unknown forces come with lighter fuel and set the cars on fire, and we saw the officers who were with her sadly killed, and we saw them burst into flames and things. What did people think of that scene?
Very brutal, but then it's sort of become one of the things that Line of Duty does so well. It's also nice, however brutal the shots are like that. It's also nice to see something you've not seen before, and I'd certainly not seen a scene like that before.
But I liked the procedural stuff of it, the fact that she had to get a certain level of authority, which I think sometimes is missing in some of these cop shows. People do go off and do their own thing, whereas there was very much this, she has to get authority from the right level, which comes into play later.
Obviously, Lindsay is eventually brought before AC-12. We're reintroduced to Steve and Kate, played by Martin Compston and Vicky McClure, who are sort of tasked with investigating exactly what happened, why the police officers died, and sort of, if any, part that Denton played in it.
I was kind of surprised about, in that first episode, how little Vicky McClure there was, although obviously later on she'll come back into it. But I was kind of thinking, oh, please, this is going to be like Broadchurch, where they misuse her. She was a real small part in that, and she's a great actress, as she showed in Series 1.
But I think they sort of utilised her well in this, because they had to introduce Georgia, played by Jessica Raine, who is this sort of younger, enthusiastic addition to the team. We see her, she's a bit... Steve's not sure about her to begin with, and then we have a really brilliant, over 10-minute interrogation scene. So what do we think of this? And there was a lot... I'll talk about the screening and stuff in a minute, but there was a lot about that scene said. Do we like the sort of the lengthy talky scenes that were in this? Especially, obviously, this one was sort of the pivotal scene.
I liked it. I don't necessarily remember that. I mean, it's very similar to sort of what happened in the last series of Luther, weren't there? In the first episode, there were lots of these kind of like probing interviews of, why did you do this? And
Luther, they were sort of intercut with other scenes. This was a really sort of intense 10 minutes. As they said on the screen, it's all filmed in sort of like a glass box, and apparently it was really hot on that day as well. When
it was filmed inside the cube.
Inside the cube,
filmed just outside. What I really liked was the three detectives, the AC-12 detectives, playing different roles. Adrian Dunbar was the nice, but was prepared to ask difficult questions. The male character was the kind of the bad cop. He was the one that said, well, why did you do that? And then the new detective, she was this kind of very friendly, nice, oh, you did well, Mom, and must have been very horrible for you, Mom. It was a very nice complimentary way of putting them together. It was different from the good cop, bad cop.
You had these scenes of real action, edge of your seat shocks and all that. But at the same time, you just have these scenes of characters talking. But it's just as involving, I think, as the stuff that's going on.
I've got to say, I mean, you pointed that out to me, the length of the scene. I think I didn't notice the length of the scene because I was engrossed in it. When we did a podcast recently where we spoke about Sherlock, and I said I found myself looking at the clock occasionally. And made myself sound like I didn't have much of an attention span when it comes to good drama. This had my full attention from the word go. That scene could have quite easily been 15 minutes, and I don't think I'd have batted an eyelid. I was
okay, so as Gary mentioned earlier, the scene in the toilet, which he alluded to, and I think this did occur slightly before Lindsay went to AC-12. Obviously, after the incident, her colleagues blame her for 2 officers dying. And it leads to a scene where she goes to the toilet and has her head shoved down it, basically, which Keeley Hawes herself did describe as some of the most fun she's ever had while filming. Did this scene shock you? I know it definitely shocked me when I saw it, and that, the intense sort of close-ups of all of her colleagues and stuff.
Well, I don't know why. It kind of felt unreal. Like the way in which her colleagues were looking at that sort of cold, hard stare, it was almost as if it was more something she imagined had happened. Kind of surprised in that I would have thought she would have lodged some sort of complaint about this.
It moves to her commanding officer moving her away and giving her a new sort of department where she's looking into missing people. There's like a little bit of a subplot where she goes to meet the parents of a girl who's gone missing. That's something we're not quite sure where it's going, but also we see the picture of Gina McKee's Jackie Laverty on the computer. Yeah. Now, what did we think of this?
It was a clever way of saying, remember what we did before.
Do you think?
Or it was a nice little take to, if you watched us before, this is for you.
I know Gina McKee's character obviously died in series 1, which, we don't know. But
no, she's alive and well in Hebburn.
Oh, okay. We don't know who that person was that was under the blanket in the very first sort of section. Hopefully this idea of her being involved in missing persons might have someone, I know this kind of comes on to later, might come back to that.
Just going back to what was said at the screening, someone did ask Jed what if anything it meant, and he said, is it just a nod to the past, or is it is it something that will pop up in future? And he declined to answer it completely. So
can I just say, we're not all as friends with the cast of
Jed Mercutio, the writer and
creator.
Jed
Mercutio is the writer and the creator of the series. Yeah.
Okay, now she's got this department on her own. She's sort of been shoved out the way. Her boss says she can have her assistant, is it DC, something like
DC,
that?
I think.
Now eager to help, Kate comes in and sort of is undercover, working alongside.
Which made me think that Keeley Hawes' character hadn't seen the first series.
Yes. Well, if she did, she'd have recognised Gina McKee on the computer.
But also, she's been a bit busy. She's been out in Kyrgyzstan, hasn't she, on the ambassadors? So, I mean, she's been out of the country.
True, yeah. She's been out of the country, yeah. That's a good point.
Okay, so sort of moving to the scenes in sort of the nightlife, the ones where Ted takes out Steve and Georgia to dinner, and here we learn he's estranged from his wife, and there's an odd couple of scenes with Ted and his wife. Yeah. What do we think of this sort of subplot?
Really good. I thought this was really good because last year he was in the show, but he was only ever involved in the police investigation. You saw nothing of his outside life. So I thought it was great to get a little bit of that, to see about the difficulty.
It's important to move that sort of a character on, otherwise he's always in the background just yelling at, whoever.
And obviously this as well was where Steve and Georgia had a bit of a night out and ended up smooching, but I think this was sort of on the cards, do you think, a little bit? Do you think this was sort of to build up to something that never happened? Do you think?
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Something else I haven't mentioned yet is the sort of side plot with, is it Mark Bonner's character? Is that his name? The sort of investigating officer of the whole shebang.
Oh yeah, yes. Sorry,
and
yes.
Liz White is sort of the press officer as well, aren't they?
Yeah.
Well, how nice was it to see Liz White? I hadn't seen her for ages.
Yeah, nice. Sort of a Ashes to Ashes, Life on Mars sort of reunion. What with Keeley Hawes?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Obviously, this was the character I think that was originally going to be played by Nigel Lindsay in the
Robert Lindsay.
An interesting side plot for now that it's all about sort of controlling the press and giving them something, about the story. What do we think of this?
I have faith in Jed. I mean, this is this third of his series I've seen. I don't think he puts anything in a script, and I hope I'm not eating these words. He doesn't put anything in a script that doesn't have a purpose or go somewhere. We have to remember we're on episode 1 of 6, and I reckon if this is anything to go by, they're going to be packed hours.
At the screening, I can't remember who introduced it now. I think it was the producer that Luke will remind me the name of from the production.
Simon Heath
mentioned that throughout the series there will be some familiar faces popping up. Because as well, I will reveal this, that at the screening Warren Brown was there, as was Greg McHugh of Fresh Meat. Now they might have just been there, as Luke said, they're friends with Martin Compston, so they might have just been there for sort of moral support, but
actors have actor friends.
Yeah, I'm just saying. He said familiar faces, so I'm not sure what he means by that.
When I went to the Endeavour screening, there were people that weren't in the episode we watched that were in other episodes that had been invited. So you could well be right.
Look at you, all dropping your screening moments.
It's only 2 that I've been to, so 3.
4. The sort of last. Any advance on 4?
No, I'm just at 4. I'm sticking on 4.
before. Right.
Do you want to gamble? Do you want to gamble, or do you want to stick with it?
I've had a lovely day. I want to go home. I know I came with nothing, but I want to leave with the 4 I got.
Serious podcasting.
Anyway, what do we think of Lindsay with the nuisance neighbour with the wine bottle?
What the heck was going on? I think it was another example to demonstrate, this Lindsay Denton isn't who we think she is.
We'll come on to that in a minute because we'll talk more about the characters in a moment. But
also, she folded her cheese sandwich very well.
So and crisps. She had some
crisps.
Yeah. So it sort of comes to a head this first episode where Lindsay tells Kate that she's popping out for a bit. Kate obviously goes to follow her, sees her making a call from a payphone.
Having removed her collar.
Having what?
Removed her collar.
Yes, of course, yes. She does that several times, doesn't she?
Yeah, I said that. There's a real inconsistency with that, which I can only assume is going to be a plot thing later.
Well, you've lost my train of thought now. So
she goes to
she
phone
finds
box.
out that Lindsay's called the hospital. She lets Steve and the others know. And they race to the hospital.
Gary, Matt's just going through this like these people are his mates. She lets Steve know, he calls somebody else.
Is it fair to say that we should have said earlier that the hospital is where the only surviving member of the fire is being kept?
The witness is being kept. They see what they think is a nurse administering a shot, and it turns out to be a man in a wig.
Like Lionel Blair in Celebrity Big Brother all over again.
And so they sort of have an altercation, which ends shockingly in Georgia being chucked out the window. So
oh my! Could you get any more northern? That was the most shocking piece.
Window.
That was the most shocking piece of TV I've seen in my entire year, and you've summed it up as Georgia being chucked out that window.
I have to say, I cannot wait to see the outburst on Twitter when this airs. I think that is going to make people go mad. More than the toilet scene, more than the smashing a wine bottle over your neighbour. This is
We've all been there.
Shock.
We've all done that.
Yeah.
Can I ask you though? Is it the sort of show that people, unlike Sherlock, it's not the sort of show that people are going to be tweeting along with? I don't think.
No, but
I think they're going to be watching it intently like we were.
I think you'll find that those that do will be making such a fuss about it that this will be one of the shows that will be most watched on iPlayer.
I would agree with that, actually.
I think this is what people will be talking about. This, to me, is similar to the Lisa Faulkner on Spooks moment. And she was quite a big name in
episode
Spooks
2
at the
of
time.
Spooks.
She was probably the most well-known actress because she'd been all that time in Holby. And this is something very similar. This girl has been in Call the Midwife, as we've mentioned, and she's a big name. And to kill her off at the end of episode 1 is such a bold, brilliant move. I love it.
After sort of being to the screening and stuff, and obviously Luke asked me how it was, I said to him, I don't want to say anything, as little as possible.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it is going to spoil it for you. After he'd seen it, he rang me, and the first thing I said to him, based on what we said about Sherlock the other week, was, if that doesn't shock you, then there's no hope for you at all.
Yeah.
What was your reaction, Gary? I mean, I was initially open-mouthed, and then I was sort of laughing at the brilliance of it. It just really made me...
I was totally gobsmacked. I think I spent a couple of minutes. I even went back and watched it to make sure I'd seen what I saw, because it was that kind of thing that you look at it and you go, God, did I miss that? Did she just get pushed out of a window?
Can I just say, this proves to me again, after moaning and whinging quite a bit, as I know I'm sort of known for now on this, proves to me again, TV is still brilliant, it can still shock, and I'm still in a long-term relationship with it.
And I will say as well, and this was brought up during the Q&A at the screening, one of the reasons it was so shocking is that they built this this wasn't just sort of a flimsy one-note character, they'd built this character up, they'd given us intrigue in those scenes in the bar. You got this impression that she wasn't like this nicey girl, she was drinking a lot, she was playing
I would have said she was borderline alcoholic.
They said she had sort of an addictive personality. But I think that's the brilliance of Jed McCushio's writing, is that he will write a fully rounded character that you believe in, and then just, as I said before, chuck her out window.
Oh my God, I hate you.
one of the things that about this sort of episode, and I'm guessing the series, is the character of Lindsay herself. Now, in the first series, we had Tony Gates, who not sort of a sort of character who was either good or bad. You know, he had made some really sort of big errors. You know, you could tell he wasn't sort of by the book, and he wasn't. You know,
he got results. I mean,
he got results, but you know,
it was almost really stereotypical, wasn't it? You know, I don't work with the rules, but I get results, man.
But what I mean is that you
did he say that?
What I mean is that you saw him sort of partake in things where he covered things up for Gina McKee and stuff like that, so you knew he wasn't on the level, and you knew that they'd eventually catch up with him. Whereas with Lindsay, with Keeley Hawes' character, you really don't know.
Well, I think you got a little bit. I think you got a little bit
with the wine bottle thing.
Well, no, I personally think when she met at the hospital with her immediate supervisor, what will be, I suppose, the detective inspector or the chief constable, she mentioned that she tried to ring him, and it was, he said, if you'd let me go 5 minutes, she said, I let you go 20. And in her interview, she mentioned that there had been previous problems about getting hold of him, and how the head of the police force had said, look, if there's a problem, you ring me. I suppose we ought to discuss very quickly the neck brace, because I think it was such a strange plot device. She wore this thing when she was at work. She walked in a different manner at work, didn't she? She walked as someone who had whiplash. Yet, when she attacked her next-door neighbour, you wouldn't have thought that she'd ever been in any accident in her life. She almost like ninja chopped her with a bottle.
That's what's so interesting about the character, though, isn't it? I think it's certainly been written as sort of an ambiguous character, and someone who is quite lonely, but looks to be, she could be quite manipulative, and you do wonder how involved she is. We don't know, because I think in the last series, Jed Mercutio let us know more about Tony Gates.
Definitely Tony Gates' character was much more open from the beginning.
Yeah.
They were investigating him almost from day one. In this series, they've been brought to her, and now they're starting the investigation.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning what you were told, or what Keeley said at the screening that you mentioned to me. Is that she read the first script, or the first couple of scripts.
This is the first 5. She said the first 5 or 6, and she said this was the first time that had ever happened, that she got so many scripts. This was before she took the role, and she rang up Jed Mercutio afterwards and said, I love it, I want to be in it, but I can't. Is she a goodie or a baddie? And he said, I haven't decided yet.
But that's brilliant. I mean, that's sorry to hink back to Broadchurch, but that's how Chris Chibnall played it, didn't he? He didn't tell characters whether they were good or bad. He allowed them just whether they
didn't
were
tell
the killer.
me.
No, he didn't tell you. He didn't tell who was the killer till they got to the point where they were the killer. Real people aren't black and white.
Yeah,
they're shades of grey.
Reading sort of the press notes seems that as it goes on, the sort of the relationship between the established characters will change. I'm assuming part of that reason is to do with what happens at the end of this episode.
Another very interesting note that you brought up from the screening, which again gives people some insight into the behind-the-scenes workings, is that Martin Compston, who plays Steve Arnett so brilliantly, said that he was surprised at himself and Vicky being so young and not
he described them as indie actors. He described them as...
Those two are brilliant together, aren't they?
See, obviously his first role was in Ken Loach film, was it Sweet 16? And she obviously came from the Shea Meadows' This Is England franchise, so they're from sort of the British independent realism film background, and they've sort of been entrusted with the series now.
And what I liked was the character progression in him. He is now almost like the Adrian Dunbar, the hardened veteran. Like, you'll know why we go. Teaching the new girl why we do these things in AC-12.
One thing we don't know, and it hasn't been told, is how much time is between this and the last series, which is an interesting... How long Steve and Kate now have been working together, and how sort of strong that bond is, because there was their sort of first case, as you were in the first series. So
The other scene that I thought was excellent was when Kate revealed that she's now working with Lindsay Denton, and the look on his face of, I can't react to this, but my goodness, I want to react to this.
Line of Duty, I can tell now. Last year we did a best of 2013, and obviously we'll do a best of 2014. I feel like, after seeing this first episode, putting it on the list already. Also worth mentioning, if you want to read more about the first series, I had a lovely chat with Martin Compston that's up on the website now, and you can buy the DVD of Series 1 and read all about Making Series 1 with Martin online now at thecrystaltv.com.
I did watch bits of it again just before we started to do this. Keeley Hawes' performance in it, and what do we think of that? Because obviously it's sort of very different from what we've seen her do before. You know, we've seen her play often sort of very glamorous
well, that's the thing.
Types in Upstairs, Downstairs, and obviously, you know, Ashes to Ashes. And even recently in Ambassadors, you know, she was...
I suppose you're right. You know, the main thing that hits you about Keeley Hawes in this episode is she has dulled herself down looks-wise. She's not wearing makeup for the character. She's wearing stage makeup.
What was said at the screening was that she said she really enjoyed not having to do that. She said she went into makeup, they looked at her and went, yeah, you're done. You know, she said this was just generally, she said this is the most fun she's ever had, you know, between the toilet scene and the wine bottle scene, just generally. Obviously she's sort of almost someone who's sort of typecast in a way, I suppose, you know, as sort of someone who's sort of glamorous and quite often in positions of power, and here playing this sort of isolated character that you're not really sure about. You're not sure if she's one way or another, and I think this is probably one of the best one of her best performances for me. I don't know if Luke's got it.
I would agree. Some of the scenes I loved. I mean, I did love the piano when she's playing the piano and she can't even hear herself because of the music, and they do seem to go at pains. I mean, even like as Luke mentioned, the unwrapping of the sandwiches was just so deliberately slow and gave you so much of an insight to her loneliness that there wasn't even anyone she could share lunch with. That I just think it's not only great acting but great writing for her. They've written a great role, and I would say the three strong female characters in this episode.
Jessica Raine had said, you know, she was sent the script and she called the midwife as a 6-month shoot, and she wondered, can I fit this in? You know, do I want to do something else while I'm busy doing this series? And she read it and she said, this is brilliant. And she also relished the chance to do something where she doesn't have to put on the plummy accent and be awfully. She can actually, you know, be herself a little bit more, I think she said.
Did this series deserve maybe a bump to BBC One?
I was having this conversation actually about why it's not on BBC One.
Not with us.
Not with you, no. Because I thought originally it was the violence, but then I was thinking, you know, Luther's terribly violent, and that's on BBC One. So what would you say?
Right. Keeley Hawes is a BBC One star. You know, she's not an up-and-coming actress like the others may be. You know, she can carry... Her name could have brought this to BBC One. I don't know. I mean, I'm puzzled by it. I don't really know.
I think when it was on last time in the summer of 2012, the big BBC One drama at the same time was Blackout with Christopher Eccleston. Yeah. And I remember loads of people that I spoke to on Twitter saying, surely Line of Duty should not be on BBC One and Blackout be on BBC Two.
We talked about that when we did the podcast at the time. I remember saying that.
It's just... I don't know. Maybe it's the Jed McHugh show thing and that Bodies was on BBC Two. There's no reason in my mind why.
It sort of almost makes it more of a cult drama then, doesn't it? It makes it...
I suppose, yeah.
It's not a I mean, it hasn't got like a mainstream feel to it, I suppose. And I suppose maybe they're thinking with scenes, like we mentioned, where they are so wordy and they're not broken up by like sort of, you know, quick edits and stuff like that.